Hi everybody, I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and I have sleep apnea. Now before I begin this video in full, I'd like to explain why I'm dressed this way and the fact that this is a very difficult subject for me requires me to have some courage and strength. So I chose Undyne because she is fierce but also compassionate, so I wanted to embody her warrior strength, and the Lesser Dog scarf just goes well with it. The Iowa State jacket is a very personal memento to me because of a friend I lost, and the Nintendo hat is a Christmas gift, so I just thought it complemented it well. But each of these things is to give me some strength and courage for what I'm about to talk about. And I would like to issue the following warning and say that some of you, if you are dealing with personal tragedy or loss or sensitive times in your life, this may not be the video for you. But for others of you, this may actually be helpful. It may give you some insight, it may give you some tips, it may give you some strength and courage of your own. And I hope that by sharing my experience, I can better other people's lives as mine has been bettered. But before I really get into that, I'm going to thank some other people for their courage and their strength, and they have inspired me with their videos. Musical Antihero has been very candid when he talks about depression in his videos, and he always says, if I can get through it, you can get through it, you're stronger than me. So I want to commend him for his honesty and his courage. John Riggs, he always talks about what's going on with him and his family, and his passion for video games and for his family still shows through in every video, no matter what difficulties he overcomes. So John, I give a shout out to you as well. And Aaron Hansen from Game Grumps, he's talked a lot about meditation and self-love and learning to be positive and embrace yourself. I appreciate that. I also wanted to thank Pushing Up Roses. She talks about body dysmorphia in one of her videos and the struggles she's had and things that she's worked out in therapy. And I will be getting to therapy in the course of this video, but I just wanted to say I commend her for her strength and courage as well. There are a lot of courageous YouTubers who have talked about their personal struggles, too many to name, so I won't list them all. I'm just going to go ahead and get right into the subject here, and forgive me if I recline a little bit to get a little more comfortable, since again, talking about a difficult subject here. So, I didn't know that I had sleep apnea, and I had been suffering from it for at least 5 years, and I thought snoring was just something that people did. I thought everybody snores. Snoring is natural. I'd heard my dad snore growing up, so I didn't think much of it. I just thought it was a thing. And my wife was trying to tell me over and over again that she thought I had a problem and that I should see a doctor. I wouldn't listen to her. She got tired of my snoring. Finally, it got to the point where she couldn't listen to me snore anymore, so we ended up sleeping in separate beds. And I didn't get married to be alone, so for me that was depressing. But what I didn't know was that the sleep apnea that I hadn't been diagnosed with was also causing depression, because I was being woken up by my airways collapsing 32 times an hour. That's a scary number when you actually get diagnosed, and that's what I found out, is that 32 times an hour I stopped breathing. Now, can you get a normal night's sleep when your airway closes 32 times an hour? You can't. There's no way. You don't get deep sleep. You don't get quality sleep. And the problem with that is it affects you. It affects your brain chemistry. It affects your body. You are tired and fatigued all the time. You eat more because you're trying to compensate for feeling tired and or feeling depressed. And your whole body chemistry is out of whack. The importance of a good night's sleep cannot really be overstated. So 2017 was the year where things just really went off the rails. my wife's grandfather, he decided life wasn't worth living anymore. And I lost all my grandparents long time ago. My wife only just barely knew my grandmother on my mom's side, and that was only for a very, very short amount of time. The others had been gone long before that. So for me, her grandpa, Carl, he was like a grandfather to me. He was a part of my life that I had back that I hadn't had for a long time. And, you know, I enjoyed that. People don't realize the things they miss until they're gone. And once I had that back again through marriage, I realized how much I enjoyed having a grandfather to sit and shoot bull with. You know, we'd talk weather, we'd talk sports, we'd talk about issues in Omaha, and it was never anything deep or profound, but it was just pleasant to speak to somebody who'd been there and done that and seen it all and had his experience and was still around. And, you know, I've learned through therapy not to reverse engineer things, but one of those things that my therapist taught me was that you can't go back and interpret things that were said in the past and draw meaning from them, because you don't know that that's what they meant. And even if you could, you can't change it. You can't live in the past. You can't go back to the past. We don't have a TARDIS. We can't travel back to the past. And Grandpa would make jokes, and I didn't think anything of them. He'd say, on his birthday, he'd say things like, "Oh, I'm not going to live to see another birthday." And the way he said it, it just sounded like dry humor, just gallows humor. And so I would respond to it and say things like, "Oh, Grandpa, you'll outlive us all." So just a reminder that when people say things like that, I mean, they could be joking, but then again, they might not. Because what I didn't know was that he was losing his vision. He had glaucoma and cataracts, and he failed his driving test. And he got really bummed out about that, or at least that's our interpretation. And he tried to get a prescription. He tried to go back and take the test again. The glasses didn't help. He failed the test several more times. And finally, he just had enough. And his freedom was more important to him than any of us knew. You know, he really liked being able to go where he wanted and do what he wanted, and he couldn't drive anymore. And that pushed him over the edge. And what we found out when they did the autopsy was that he had even more going on. He had like a 90% blocked coronary artery, you know, just on the verge of a full heart attack, and he'd already had one earlier in his life. And his kidneys had narrowing in the connective areas. I'm not a doctor, I can't tell you what the word is, but basically his kidneys had lowered function, almost non-functional. So he had coronary problems, he had kidney problems, he was losing his eyesight. I'm sure he could feel all of these things unraveling in his body, but he was a proud man. He was Pennsylvania Dutch from birth. He was proud, he was stubborn. He wouldn't tell anybody that he was feeling bad or that he was having health problems. He just kept carrying on every day, because that's what he thought real men do, is real men just do things and don't talk about their problems. So if I can give you another lesson here, don't be like that. Talk about your problems. And that happened over Memorial Day weekend. So that was a bad holiday. Labor Day weekend, it got even worse, because this Iowa State jacket that I'm wearing, I have a friend from college who liked it so much that he bought one just like it. So we were twins of the Iowa State jacket, and I've known David for 20 plus years because I was in college and graduated in my early 20s, and I would come back to Iowa State and continue to visit him even after I graduated, because he had a couple more years yet to finish his degree. So that's how good of friends we were. Was even when I graduated college, we still stayed in touch. And even when he moved to Des Moines and I moved to Michigan, we still stayed in touch. And I would stop and visit him whenever I came back to see my family. And he was like family to me. And he ended up being the usher in my wedding when I got married and moved to Omaha. And We talked all the time, every week, sometimes twice, 3 times a week, and he never made a short phone call. He'd call, he'd talk for an hour, we'd talk about Marvel Cinematic Universe, we'd talk about Roller Coaster Tycoon, we'd talk about his cat Bob driving him crazy. Whatever was on his mind and whatever was on my mind, we would just yak with each other. If we couldn't get together, we'd talk, like every week. He couldn't convince doctors that he wasn't an alcoholic for a long time, even though he kept having health problems. Finally, he got diagnosed in Iowa City, and they realized it was cirrhosis of the liver without alcoholism. And there's a medical term for that, and I don't remember it, but basically it was causing the fatty deposits on his liver because of his celiac disease and his dietary problems and all the other screwed up things that were going on in his body. So, long story short, he had liver failure and he needed a transplant, and he got on the list. But the cruel irony of being on a transplant list is that there aren't enough organs to go around, so you get ranked by order of how close you are to dying. And then when you are actually close to dying and your other organs start failing too, then they won't give you a liver because you're already too far gone, and they're not going to put a healthy liver into a person who won't survive even if they get it. And that's what happened to David, because his blood infection caused his liver failure, kidney failure, and cascading failure of everything in his body. His lungs filled up with fluid, his heart wasn't beating correctly because of his lungs. You know, they put him in the ICU in Des Moines, then they transferred him here to the University of Nebraska Medical Center. I saw him in Des Moines before things took a complete downturn. When I saw him here in Omaha, he was in a medically induced coma and couldn't even speak anymore. I stood in a hospital room and watched them pull the plug, and my best friend was gone. Or I have multiple best friends. Again, I didn't rehearse this. I have a best friend I've known since high school who's still around. I have a best friend I've known since college. He's no longer around. I have a best friend who I met online and got to know in person when I moved to Michigan. He's still around. And of course, my wife is a best friend too, because you marry your best friend. That's kind of what marriage is all about. So I lost one best friend, but David was a very important one to me because he was a fun guy. He was unafraid to live life loudly. He had no shame and no qualms, and he would say things that might be too high a volume for the crowd he was in at a restaurant, and he didn't care, and we would tell him to tone it down, and he'd try to, but he was just a naturally loud, gregarious person, and uncensored in his comments on anything, whether it was politics or religion or video games. He would give it to you exactly the way he saw it, completely unfiltered. And I respected that about him, and it made me admire him so much as a friend, that he was just that bold that he was never going to let anybody tell him he was wrong. Even if he was just gonna be passionate about what he was passionate about. And I didn't do it, but I talked about it, and I talked about it in such bleak terms that my wife said, you need help, you need therapy, you need medication, and you need to see a doctor about your sleep apnea. And hitting that low point where I almost did something drastic made me realize she was right and I needed help. So I went to a doctor who has sleep apnea, and he asked me all the right questions, and he said, I've got to be honest with you, Steve. This is what my life was like when I had sleep apnea, and you have all the same symptoms. So we're going to get you a sleep study. You're going to take a home test, and we're going to see if we can confirm this diagnosis. And that came back positive. And then I went to a sleep center for a full night's sleep test where they measure the pressure levels so that when you're wearing this mask, you're getting the right amount of air coming into your body to keep your airways open, because they have to set the pressure level to just the right amount. It's called titration, I think is the term. If I'm getting that wrong, I apologize. But they had to set the titration levels. So that was a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of stress. But once I got this and started using it every night, putting it on before I went to sleep, things changed so dramatically. I was already doing the other things that were recommended to me by a doctor. I was taking medication for depression. I was taking Cymbalta, I still do. I was seeing a therapist. I go every 3 weeks now. When I was in crisis, I was going every week, but we scaled it back a little bit after that because therapy is expensive too. Even if you have medical coverage, you still have a copay on it. So I was doing therapy, I was doing medication, but I wasn't addressing the chemical imbalance that a lack of sleep was causing, and this addressed it. And once I started using this every night, the fatigue just melted away. It was not completely gone, but I wasn't taking naps every few hours like I had been before. Now if I take one nap every 2 or 3 days, that's a lot. And the longer I use this, the less I need to nap. And the less I need to nap, the better balanced I am. And the better balanced I am, the happier and more positive I am. And the better I feel about myself, and the better my relationships are with other people. I can laugh, I can joke, I can have fun again. You don't realize when depression becomes your normal that it's not normal, because it creeps up on you little by little, very slowly. So every single time you feel worse, it just seems like that's how you're supposed to feel. And until somebody tells you that you're depressed, you can't always see it in yourself, because you have been changing in such small increments over such a long period of time that it doesn't occur to you how much you've changed and how your body has changed. And even if it costs you some money, just remember, money isn't everything, because you can't take it with you to the grave. So you're better off spending that money to feel better than you are hoarding it and dying with it. And that's all I have to say today. This may have been a little long, this may have been a little rambling, but I hope with my Undertale garb and my Nintendo hat and my Iowa State jacket, I hope after a little bit of a rough start there at the beginning, I hope I came through with some courage of my own and persevered and told you something worthwhile. And if it helps even one person, then I'm glad I did it. This is Mr. MegaManFan with his most personal YouTube video of this entire channel, at least so far, saying, I miss you, David, I miss you, Carl, and I love you all.